Thank you very much for having me, everyone. I'm, as Sophie said, an information designer from Medano, which is now part of Accenture. So I work in a huge consultancy on quite a range of projects. And I'm going to talk to you today about using a design process for data visualization projects. So in any data visualization project, you'll have some data and you'll have some people who need information from that data. Data visualization kind of sits in the middle to be the kind of conversation between those two things. But sometimes when we're really focused on what we're trying to produce in terms of visualization, or maybe someone's given us a really direct instruction as to what they want to see, we can get a little bit focused on the data visualization. Maybe we're trying out something really technically difficult, or we get bogged down in that. So we sometimes forget about the end user. And in this case, a design process can be really helpful as a framework to kind of cement our thinking and make sure that we're doing the right kinds of things. There are quite a lot of different diagrams that people use for design process, but fundamentally they all kind of talk about understanding the situation that you're working in, coming up with some ideas to solve the problem that is arising from those, and trying things out and testing them on people, and then eventually getting people to use it. So the Design Council has one that focuses on divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent, where you're trying to open up to new ideas and explore different options, and convergent when you're trying to narrow down your focus and get really specific about what you're trying to do. So they have a double diamond shape thing. The Interaction Design Foundation has interpreted it slightly differently, and they go through the stages of empathizing with your users, trying to understand what it's like to be them, defining your problem, coming up with some ideas, prototyping those ideas, and testing your ideas. The Interaction Design Foundation brings in the important aspect that this isn't a linear process. It doesn't go from A to B. You loop back, and everything that you learn along the process can inform previous decisions. And it's absolutely right to iterate on those, as Anna said. At Medano, we've created a very complicated one that I quite like just because it's squiggly and it shows that it's not quite an easy thing to do, and sometimes you have to go right back to the start. But still, it kind of has those 4 stages of kind of understanding what's going on, identifying the challenges, creating concepts and ideas, experimenting with them, and then embedding it in your organization. The precise details of this will vary from project to project, and you just need to pick what's right for your current situation. The reality does not necessarily allow us to do the process from start to finish. Often other people get in the way. So let's say you had the global superstore data set or something similar to that, and someone told you, I want to see sales over time. This slightly limits your ability to be creative with this and to really think about what you're trying to visualize because they've told you. So you start right in the middle of the design process. You're probably at the prototyping stage at this point. You probably don't need that many iterations because they've said what they want to see. It's quite easy for you to find that maybe, and you can present it to them. So it's quite limiting as an information designer or a visualization expert to do that. If you ask them why, you might come up with a little bit more information. There could be a number of reasons that they want to see sales over time information. Perhaps they're working on a marketing campaign and they want to know what products to focus on. Maybe they're in charge of warehouse space and they want to make sure that they're making the most efficient use of it. Perhaps they're checking the contracts with a delivery company and they want to focus on the right areas geographically. Or maybe they're thinking about how they might reward their loyal customers. All of these will probably have some variation of sales over time that is useful for understanding these problems. But the types of graphs that you'll come up with each of these different problems are probably quite different. And you'll focus on different areas. You might use filters in a different way. You might combine it with different types of data. And you might realize that actually you don't have all the data that you need to answer the questions. For example, I haven't studied the global superstore data set recently, but I don't think it has the size of the product on there. So if you're trying to fit it in a warehouse, you may not know how big it is. And at this point, you open yourself up to a bit more of the design process. Now you can come up with a more specific definition of what you're trying to do. And you can open up to other problems that you might need to address to really give the user the most useful information. You've got a lot more opportunity to come up with ideas, and you've actually got things to try out here. It's not just one chart that someone's told you they want to see. You've got a lot of different options that you can try. And ultimately, it's probably going to be a more fulfilling experience and more useful for people. And then at this point, you can always work backwards to understand a bit more about the users themselves, to conduct research with them, ask them questions about what they do all day, and really try and fit your visualization into their day-to-day work. So it's not just another thing that they have to deal with. It's something that can fit quite seamlessly into their work every day. And you can do this by observing their behaviors and what they do, asking them questions about what they like or don't like, and coming up with insight about the people who are using the data visualization that you're creating. And then you can really transform this process to make sure that the users, the people who need the information from the data, are the ones that you're really focusing on throughout the whole process. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks.
Everyone, please pop your questions in the chat. But while we're waiting for those to come in, I have a couple. So first of all, I loved your talk through of the development of your specific Medano design process. Just wondering, for someone picking that process up and who's about to embark on a project, how would you recommend that they sort of allocate time to each phase of that? Would you say that there's a proportion of time that you expect to spend in each phase, or is it sort of too agile to even say?
Well, there's the ideal, and then there's what you're actually going to get on a project.
Very true.
Very different things. I think ideally you'd spend a lot of time in the research area and understanding your users and defining the problem. And then from that, hopefully the visualization side of things is relatively quick. So I'm kind of lumping in technical requirements in that as well, and understanding how the data works. I don't know that stuff very well. So that will be in the first part of it, and hopefully the majority of your work would be in that area. In reality, it doesn't work like that. People don't like to pay for research time. They just want to see stuff. So usually you need to come in the middle point, show them some stuff, and then say, I can make this better if you let me ask you some questions. And so then that kind of working back tends to be more how people do it. But once you're kind of used to working with a particular client, usually they're more receptive to doing that first, because it is actually faster in the long run. But it just kind of takes that conversation and bringing them on the journey of using a design process for data viz as well, because it's probably not something they're familiar with.
Definitely. Thank you. We've got a couple of questions coming in, so I'm just going to read them out now. So someone's asked, so Michelle's just asked, how do you balance deadlines for the process? And she's also said, great talk, I love how fun it is.
Thank you. Balancing deadlines with the process. I think it's just about communicating with people and kind of letting them know what your limitations are and kind of how much you can achieve with the information that you currently have available. So you'll always be able to do something, unless you actually can't, in which case, just tell them that. But I think it's kind of letting them know what's going on and, where they can help you by getting more information. I work with a range of, I usually work with Tableau developers and business analysts, and then we have some project managers around doing something important as well. And I think kind of helping them to get you access to the users is probably one of the most beneficial things that they can do. And just kind of saying, all right, well, if I can't actually speak to the users, then we might come into this problem later on. So it's probably advisable for them to try and front load that, or at least to get it in the diaries, because if you're working with senior people, they're impossible to pin down. So and actually get them to commit the time to you. So even just having a conversation about what do you do all day is quite useful. Yeah, I hope I answered that question. Thanks, Michelle.
That's really good. Maybe we have time for maybe just one more. I think someone was curious about the comment you made about color theory in your introduction, perhaps. So they're curious about how do you balance including the brand colors and style of a client with visual best practice, taking into account color theory?
Grey, lots of grey. Yeah, brand colors are horrendous for data viz in nearly all situations. But I think generally trying to minimize the amount of color that you use on screen As Anna said, I think kind of using fewer rather than more colours is good for this. And yeah, just grey it up, everything grey, and then you add colour rather than the other way around, I think. Add colour to draw focus. But yeah, colour theory is mind-blowing. Don't know how people manage that.